3 o'clock from now on?
I won't be able to make it.
God says in the building.
Stevie, Cat got your tongue?
What's that?
Yeah, next week we're gonna be gone, right? When are we taking off? Yeah.
Well, this is realistic.
There's plenty of it back there.
What's that? I say that added
Okay,
2.5.
all right, so next weekend, okay,
This is.
That's kind of cool.
all right, thanks.
Until you
Can you
see
do
it.
Thursday noon for
That.
me?
Isn't that crazy?
Terry's getting operated on. I got a driver.
Ooh,
The abyss.
you gonna be all right?
It's just cataract.
I was wise.
Outpatient. That doesn't take very long.
I got a driver though.
Yeah. Remember I had to pick Reagan up one time after cataracts.
Okay, we can change to 3 o'clock from now on. Is
Okay.
that okay with everybody?
No, it was fine.
I can't make 3 tomorrow.
Oh, you can't?
Oh, we
I
can,
can stay
we can,
with 4. I mean,
we can keep
Well,
it
we
with
just leave it
4.
at 4 then.
Yeah.
We're all set at 4 o'clock, we just.
We
leave
don't
it
wanna,
that way.
we don't wanna be without
Okay,
Jim.
we don't wanna cut anybody out that's been coming. Hi, John.
How we doing?
Okay, it's 4 o'clock, we're
Can I
gonna
just
start
make
it.
one announcement real quick? I went and seen Steve Roper. He's excited to go to the AA meeting at Madonna Wednesday at 7 o'clock. So, you guys wanna go to a meeting with Steve Wednesday at 7 at Madonna? That's it.
Thanks, Tyler.
Okay.
That's all you got? That's all I got. Thanks.
And I went to see Chuck McBride this morning, and he's just really not doing good. He couldn't remember his sister's name, he couldn't remember her address. He just not there most of the time. I mean, he knew who I was, but can't recall much of anything.
I went and seen him Thursday, and he recognized me, but I don't think he knew my name. And I said,
That's what you
I heard
call
you
a,
had visitors
gainer.
tonight. And he said, yeah.
And that
He
was
said,
like,
it was a big crowd.
it looked like it was like 100
So
feet.
that was apparently when you and Redbird and all them go see him.
To do a gainer from that
No,
high would
I-
just hurt
I
so
don't
bad.
think so.
I think that was on Tuesday night.
Yeah. Okay, anyway, we got people that need prayer, so if you got any of those to spare, pray for them. God's got them. Okay, we're gonna work on step 4 and 5 and try and get through those today. And then next time we'll do step 6, but we'll talk about that later. Okay, so, did I talk about the questions in step 4 last time, in the last half of the 12 and 12? It's all full of questions about those 3 instinctual drives that we have.
I don't think so. You better review those again.
We didn't get that far? Okay. Okay, so we get that. Okay. Remember, we're here to get well, and you can become as well as you want to be. It just depends on how hard you want to work the program. And the big books, the 12 and 12, and some of our meditation books, I'll talk about self-restraint, discipline, being in the sunlight of the Spirit, and the channel and all that. We'll cover most of that as we go through the books. And last time we talked, when we were reading out of the big book, we talked about real or fancied. Remember? Did anybody go back and try and figure out some of those things that might have happened when you were smaller that really didn't happen the way you thought about it and the way you reacted to it? Remember, I gave you a couple of examples of what happened to me. Okay? we're gonna run into that real or fancy thing. It's on page 66 in the big book. It's on page 207 in a story. And it's in the 12 and 12 on page 82. Talks about real or fancy. And there's another place or two where it talks about, did it really happen that way?
What were those page numbers again?
Hmm?
Page numbers again?
66, 212, 207, and 82 in the 12 and 12. Okay, we read last time up to page 69, up to where it talks about sex in the big book. Okay? So on page 66, it talks about being in the sunlight of the Spirit. That's a pretty important page. Remember that one. On page 62, it talks about building the arch to freedom and making our higher power the keystone of that arch. That's really an important part of the book, because we'll show you why when we get down a few pages here. Okay? And I think I gave you a list of pages that have defects on them, but I can do that later, because we'll do more of that when we get to 6 if I didn't do it. Okay. So we read up to about sex in the big book, so why don't we take the 12 and 12 and read step 4, and we'll go around the room reading a paragraph or two at a time. And if you were here last time, I read the first 3 or 4 paragraphs of step 4, because that talks about our 3 instinctual drives, remember? Our drives for
Emotional.
procreation and to continuous honor as human beings, our emotional and material desire, and our desire for social activities. We're a social animal. And if those instincts get out of whack, we do something else. We drink. You know, too much sex, too much money, too much dependent on other people, on and on and on. And at the top of page 43 in my book, which is about the 3rd or 4th paragraph, it says we want to find exactly how, when, and where our natural desires have warped us. We wish to look squarely at the unhappiness this has caused others and ourselves by discovering what our emotional deformities are. It doesn't say that we might have them, it says we have emotional deformities. And by discovering what they are, we could move toward their correction. Without a willing and persistent effort to do this, there can be little sobriety or contentment for us. Without a searching and fearless moral inventory, most of us have found that the faith that really works in daily living is still out of reach. And there's a couple of those things I turn around, okay? First of all, it says, I can have sobriety and contentment. But it also says I'm going to have to have a willing and persistent effort to do my 4th step and to look at my emotional deformities. Then it says that I can have a faith that really works in daily living, which is still out of reach. I want that. So what do I have to do? I have to do a searching and fearless moral inventory. Okay? That kind of gets us started. So, Dan, go ahead and read the next paragraph.
We're on before tackling?
Yes.
Yeah.
Before tackling the inventory problem in detail, let's have a closer look at what the basic problem is. Simple examples like the following take a world of meaning when we think about them. Suppose a person places sex desire ahead of everything else. In such a case, the imperious urge can destroy his chances for material and emotional security, as well as his standing in the community. Another may develop such an obsession for financial security that he wants to do nothing but hoard money. Going to the extreme, he can become a miser or even recluse who denies himself both family and friends.
Yeah, I'm sure that everybody could come up with one example of some of those. You know, in your lifetime, you've seen those kind of things happen. Okay, go ahead, Fred.
Nor is the quest for security always expressed in terms of money. How frequently we see a frightened human being determined to depend completely upon a stronger person for guidance and protection. This weak one, failing to meet life's responsibilities with his own resources, never grows up. Disillusionment and helplessness are his lot. In time, all his protectors either flee or die, and he is once more left alone and afraid.
We have also seen men and women who go power mad, who devote themselves to attempting to rule their fellows. These people often throw to the winds every chance for legitimate security and a happy family life. Whenever a human being becomes a battleground for instincts, there can be no peace.
But that is not all of the danger. Every time a person imposes his instincts unreasonably upon others, unhappiness follows. If the pursuit of wealth tramples upon people who happen to be in the way, then anger, jealousy, and revenge are likely to be aroused. If sex runs riot, there is a similar uproar. Demands must be made upon other people for too much attention, protection, and love only invite domination or revulsion in the protectors themselves. Two emotions quite as unhealthy as the demands which evoke them. When an individual's desire for prestige becomes uncontrollable, whether in the sewing circle or at the international conference table, other people suffer and often revolt. This collision of instincts can produce anything from a cold snub to a blazing revolution. In these ways, we are set in conflict not only with ourselves, but with other people who have instincts also, too.
Anybody have trouble getting along with other people?
No,
That's
not
probably why
here.
we're here. Go ahead, John.
Alcoholics especially should be able to see that instinct run wild in themselves is the underlying cause of their destructive drinking. We are drunk to drown feelings of fear, frustration, and depression. We are drunk to escape the guilt of passions, and then have drunk again to make more passions possible. We have drunk for vainglory, that we might the more enjoy foolish dreams of pomp and power. This perverse soul sickness is not pleasant to look upon. Instincts on rampage balk at investigation. The minute we make a serious attempt to probe them, we are liable to suffer severe reactions.
Okay, at the end of that paragraph, it says, instincts on rampage balk at investigation. That's why it's really hard for us to change. Those instinctual drives that have become unbalanced, if you want to say that, because of our thinking and our actions in the past, they don't want to change because that's our defense mechanism. That's how we've survived. So I have to get in here and I have to read those things that say, do I want good sobriety and peace and contentment? Okay, this is what I have to do. I have to go back and look at those things and decide whether I want to be that way or not. And if I don't want to be that way, I have to discipline myself and change. It's just not going to happen overnight. When we get to 6 and 7 and it says, I'm just going to say a prayer to God and all these defects are going to be gone, that's not what's going to happen. God can help us if we can help ourselves, but we've got to do the disciplining and pray so God can help us do it. Doesn't just happen overnight. Okay, go ahead.
Temperamentally, we are on the depressive side. We are apt to be swamped with the guilt and self-loathing. We wallow in this messy fog, often getting misshapen and painful pleasure out of it. As we morbidly pursue the melancholy activity, we may sink to such a point of despair that nothing but oblivion is possible as a solution. Here, of course, We have lost all perspective, and therefore all genuine humility. For this pride in reverse, this is not, for this is pride in reverse. This is not a moral inventory at all. It is the very process by which the depressive has so often been led to the bottle and extinction.
Okay, right here, they're gonna give us 3 different kinds of people, and that one I've got out in the margin, that's the poor me guy. You know, poor me, nothing ever goes my way, I'm just gonna go kill myself. Okay, go ahead, Tyler.
If, however, our natural disposition is inclined to self-righteousness or grandiosity, the reaction will be just the opposite. We will be offended at AA's suggested inventory. No doubt we shall point with pride to the good lives we thought we led before the bottle cut us down. We shall claim that our serious character defects, if we think we have any at all, have been caused chiefly by excessive drinking. This being so, we think it logically follows that sobriety, first, last, and all the time, is the only thing we need to work for. We believe that our one-time good characters will be revived the moment we quit alcohol. If we were pretty nice people all along, except for our drinking, what need is there for a moral inventory now that we are sober?
Out in the margin, I've got, I'm okay, that's the paragraph where I'm okay, all I gotta do is quit drinking. Well, when you quit drinking, how much of your life changed? Got probably worse for a while, because everything went to shit. It did in my life. You know, drinking wasn't my only problem, I had lots of other problems. Okay, go ahead.
We also clutter, another wonderful excuse for avoiding an inventory. Our present anxieties and troubles, we cry, are caused by the behavior of other people who really need a moral inventory. We firmly believe that if only they treat us better, we'd be all right. Therefore, we think our indignation is justified and reasonable, that our resentments are the right kind. We aren't the guilty ones, they are.
I've got their fault written out in the margin on that one. Their fault, not mine. Okay, go ahead.
At this stage of the inventory proceedings, your sponsors come to the rescue. They can do this. For they are the carriers of AA's tested experience with the 4th step. They comfort the melancholy one by first showing him that his is not strange or different, that his character defects are probably not more numerous or worse than those of anyone else in AA. This, the sponsor promptly provides, promptly proves by talking freely and easily, and without exhibitionism about his own defects, past and present. This calm yet realistic stock taking is immensely reassuring. The sponsor probably points out that the newcomer has some assets which can be noted along with his liabilities. This trends to clear away morbidly and encourage balance. As soon as he begins to be more objective, the newcomer can fearlessly, rather than fearfully, look at his own defects.
Lyle.
The sponsors of those who feel they need no inventory are confronted with quite another problem. This is because people who are driven by pride have self-unconsciously blind themselves to their liabilities. These newcomers scarcely need comforting. The problem is to help them discover a chink in the walls their ego has built, through which the light of reason can shine.
Read another one.
First off, they can be told that the majority of AA members have suffered severely from self-justification during their drinking days. For most of us, self-justification is the maker of excuses. Excuses, of course, for not drinking, and for all kinds of crazy and damaging conduct. We made the invention of alibis a fine art. We had to drink because times were hard or times were good. We had to drink because at home we were smothered with love or got none at all. We had to drink because at work we were great successes or dismal failures. We had to drink because our nation had won a war or lost a peace. And so it went ad infinitum.
These next two paragraphs are really important. Go, John.
We thought conditions drove us to drink, and when we tried to correct these conditions and found that we couldn't to our entire satisfaction, our drinking went out of hand and we became alcoholics. It never occurred to us that we needed to change ourselves to meet conditions, whatever they were. But in AA, we slowly learned that something had to be done about our vengeful resentments, self-pity, and unwarranted pride. We had to see that every time we played the big shot, we turned people against us. We had to see that when we harbored grudges and planned revenge for such defeats, we were really beating ourselves with the club of anger we had intended to use on others. We learned that if we were seriously disturbed, our first need was to quiet that disturbance, regardless of who or what we thought caused it.
Okay, that last sentence. We learned that if we were seriously disturbed, our first need was to quiet the disturbance, regardless of who or what we thought caused it. Isn't that what it says in the Serenity Prayer? That's what the Serenity Prayer says. I mean, except those things I cannot change. I'm encouraged to change the things I can myself. So if I get disturbed because of anger, resentment, jealousy, self-pity, and unwarranted pride and all those things, I'm just kicking my own ass. And as long as I do that, as long as I roll these character defects around in my head, I'm not in the sunlight of the Spirit. What does it say? That we shut ourselves off from the sunlight of the Spirit. It says on page 66. The reason it says that is because when we have anger and resentment and all those other things, God can't talk to us. Our higher power cannot work with us if we're all messed up with our own thinking. Okay? And we'll find out more about that as we work some of the other steps. Because step 11 talks about emotional sobriety. That maybe by then we've finally got control of some of our emotions and some of our thinking so that we can actually be different. Okay? So that's a pretty important paragraph right there. Our first need was to quiet the disturbance, regardless of who or what we thought caused it. The reason I'm pointing that out a couple of times is we're going to come to another part in the book in step 10 that talks about that exact same thing. Okay? So, Tom.
To see how erratic emotions victimizes us often took a long time. We could perceive them quickly in others, but only slowly in ourselves. First of all, we had to admit that we had many of these defects, even though such disclosures were painful and humiliating. Where other people were concerned, we had to drop the word blame from our speech and thought. This required great willingness even to begin. But once over the first 2 or 3 high hurdles, the course ahead began to look easier. We had started to get perspective on ourselves, which is another way of saying we were gaining in humility. Of course, the depressive and the power driver are personality extremes, types with these which AA and the whole world abound. Often these personalities are just as sharply defined as the examples given. But just as often, some of us will fit more or less into both classifications. Human beings are never quite alike, so each of us, when making an inventory, will need to determine what his individual character defects are. Having found the shoes that fit, he ought to step into them and walk with new confidence that he is at last on the right track.
we might fit more or less into one or two or three categories. If you remember in step 2, there were 5 different kinds of people that were alcoholic, and we're like 1 or 2 or 3 of them. If you went through there and tried to figure out who you were and why you were like that, then you'll have a pretty good handle on what they're talking about here. Now let's ponder the need for a list of more glowing personality defects, all of us have in varying degrees. To those having religious training, such a list would set forth serious violation of moral principles. Some others will think of this list as defects of character. Still others will call it an index of maladjustments. Now there's a good one. Some will be quite annoyed if there is talk about immorality, let alone sin. But all who are in the least reasonable will agree on one point, that there is plenty wrong with us alcoholics, about which plenty will have to be done if we are to expect sobriety, progress, and any real ability to cope with life. Now, they tried really hard in the big book, and they tried really hard in these books to stay out of religion, okay? But they can't help themselves. There might not be another example, so this next paragraph says, to avoid falling into confusion over the names these defects shall be called, let's take a universally approved, recognized list of major human failings. The 7 deadly sins of pride, greed, lust, anger, gluttony, envy, and sloth. It is not by accident that pride heads the procession. For pride, leading to self-justification, has always spurred by conscious or unconscious fears, is the chief breeder of most human difficulties, the chief block to true progress. Pride lures us into making demands upon ourselves and upon others which cannot be met without perverting or misusing our God-given instincts. When the satisfactions of our instincts for sex, security, and society become the sole object of our lives, then pride steps in to justify our excesses. So now they're telling us why it's hard for us to change. I just frickin' deep down inside think I'm right. And I'm just damn it not gonna change. So I have to really work to get through that big wall of pride, okay? Now it's gonna talk about fear. Go, Dan.
All these failings generate fear, a soul sickness in its own right. Then fear, in turn, generates more character defects. Unreasonable fear that our instincts will not be satisfied drives us to covet the possessions of others, to lust for sex and power, to become angry when our instinctive demands are threatened, to be envious when the ambitions of others seem to be realized while ours are not. We eat, drink, and grab for more of everything we need, fearing we shall never have enough. And with genuine alarm at the prospect of work, we stay lazy. We loaf and procrastinate, or at our best, work grudgingly under half steam. These fears are the termites that ceaselessly devour the foundations of whatever sort of life we try to build.
So when AA suggests a fearless moral inventory, it must seem to every newcomer that more is being asked of him than he can do. Both his pride and his fear beat him back every time he tries to look within himself. Pride says, you need not pass that way, and fear says, you dare not look. But the testimony of AAs who have really tried a moral inventory is that pride and fear of this sort turn out to be boogeymen, nothing else. Once we have a complete willingness to take inventory and exert ourselves to do the job thoroughly, a wonderful light falls upon this foggy scene. As we persist, a brand new kind of confidence is born, and the sense of relief at finally facing ourselves is indescribable. These are the first fruits of step 4.
Okay, so it just gave us some rewards for doing a searching and fearless moral inventory, didn't it? A brand new kind of confidence is born, a sense of relief at finally facing ourselves. Those are the first fruits of step 4. I want those things, so I have to go back, read what it tells me to do, and then I just have to go do it. Go ahead, Paul.
By now, the newcomer has probably arrived at the following conclusions: that his character defects representing instincts gone astray have been the primary cause of his drinking and his failure at life. That unless he is now willing to work hard at the elimination of worst of these defects, both sobriety and peace of mind will still elude him. That all the faulty foundations of his life will have to be torn out and built anew on bedrock. Now willing to commence the search of his own defects, he will ask, just how do I go about this? How do I do an inventory of myself?
It just gave us a question, so what's it gonna do? Give us the answers. Go, Steve.
Since step 4 is but the beginning of a lifetime practice, it can be suggested that he first have a look at those personal flaws which are acutely troublesome and fairly obvious. Using his best judgment of what has been right and what has been wrong, he might make a rough survey of his conduct with respect to primary instincts for sex, security, and society. Looking back over his life, he can readily get underway by consideration of questions such as these.
Okay, it's really easy to do an inventory initially and say, what don't I want? Well, I don't want to go to jail. I don't want to get caught stealing. I want, and just a few things like that. I don't want to get caught speeding and get a ticket. So I can stop those things pretty quick. But it's really hard to change my thinking and how I act and stuff. So we'll get into more of that, okay? Go ahead.
When and how and in just what instances did my selfish pursuit of the sex relations damage other people and me? What people were hurt and how badly? Did I spoil my marriage and injure my children? Did I jeopardize my standing in the community? Just how did I react to these situations at the time? Did I burn with a guilt that nothing could extinguish? Or did I insist that I was the pursued and not the pursuer, and thus absolve myself? How have I reacted to frustration in sexual matters? When denied, did I become vengeful or depressed? Did I take it out on other people? If there was rejection or coldness at home, did I use this as a reason for promiscuity?
There's a little left, don't make any more.
Also, the importance for most alcoholics are the questions they must ask about their behavior respecting financial and emotional security. In these areas, fear, greed, possessiveness, and pride have too often done their work. Surveying his business or employment record, almost any alcoholic can ask questions like these. In addition to my drinking problem, what character defects contributed to my financial instability? Did fear and inferiority about my fitness for my job destroy my confidence and fill me with conflict? Did I try to cover up those feelings of inadequacy by bluffing, cheating, lying, or evading responsibility? Or by griping that others fail to recognize my truly exceptional abilities? Did I overvalue myself and play the big shot? Did I have such unprincipled ambition that I double-crossed and undercut my associates? Was I extravagant? Did I recklessly borrow money, caring little whether it would be repaid or not? Was I a pinch penny, refusing to support my family properly? Did I cut corners financially? What about the quick money deals, the stock market, and the races?
Businesswoman and
Wait a minute. When I read that paragraph, they got me. They absolutely tagged me. Because what about the quick money deals, the stock market, and the races? And, shit, I did all those. And in the middle of the paragraph, where was it at? Yeah, what was it? I tried to cover up, somebody said that I was average. Where's that at? That I have such unprincipled ambition that I double-crossed, undercut my associates. I had a boss in 1962, and I busted my ass really hard working for a year. And he rated me as average. And it pissed me off. And I thought, ain't no son of a bitch ever gonna say I'm average again. So I just went about and all the jobs I had outworking everybody. I'd get there earlier and stay longer and do more. And then I'd get the promotions. And I didn't give a damn about any of those other people. I just knew I had to get ahead because I didn't want to be average. But that drove me for years, and it actually really added to my alcoholism because that whole process put me alone, away from everybody, and the alcohol helped. So I had to look at all that kind of stuff, just because the guy that was my friend called me average. I mean, what a dumbass. I didn't have to be that way, but that's the way I took it.
You were a better alcoholic too.
Well, he and I were drinking a lot together, so I was an alcoholic already, but I was pretty young then. Anyway, go ahead.
Businesswomen in AA will naturally find that many of these questions apply to them too. But the alcoholic housewife can also make their family financially insecure. She can juggle charge accounts, manipulate the food budget, spend her afternoons gambling, and run her husband into debt by irresponsibility, waste, and extravagance. But all alcoholics who have drunk themselves out of jobs, family, and friends will need to cross-examine themselves ruthlessly to determine how their own personality defects have thus demolished their security.
The most common symptoms of emotional insecurity are worry, anger, self-pity, and depression. These stem from causes which sometimes seem to be within us, and at other times to come from without. To take inventory in this respect, we ought to consider carefully all personal relationships which bring continuous or recurring trouble. It should be remembered that this kind of insecurity may arise in any area where instincts are threatened. Questioning directed to this end might run like this. Looking at both past and present, what sex situations have caused me anxiety, bitterness, frustration, or depression? Appraising each situation fairly, can I see where I have been at fault? Did these perplexities beset me because of selfishness or unreasonable demands? Or if my disturbance was seemingly caused by the behavior of others, why do I lack the ability to accept conditions I cannot change? These are the sort of fundamental inquiries that can disclose the source of my discomfort and indicate whether I may be able to alter my own conduct and so adjust myself serenely to self-discipline.
Okay, and there's something it's going to talk about all the way through this thing. It says, that last sentence, indicate whether I may be able to alter my own conduct and so adjust myself serenely to self-discipline. Okay, just because I say I don't want to do something anymore, doesn't mean I'm not going to do it. I have to discipline myself and make myself not do that particular thing. And that means I have to alter my own conduct. And then if I do that a couple times, I get a little more serenity. I like that. Okay, go ahead.
Exposure to financial insecurity constantly arouses these same feelings. I can ask myself, to what extent have my mistakes caused my anxieties? And if the actions of others are part of the cause, what can I do about that? If I am unable to change the present state of affairs, am I willing to take the measures necessary to shape my life to conditions as they are? Questions like these, more of which will come to mind easily in each individual case, will help to turn out the root causes.
Okay, so these questions that we've been reading, it just said, questions like these, more of which will come to mind easily, will help turn up the root causes. So if we really think about those questions one at a time, maybe write it down on a piece of paper and try and go back through your life, you'll find the root causes as to why you act crazy sometimes when you shouldn't. Okay? And it says, I'm going to shape my life to conditions as they are. And it also says something like that on page 47 and 91. So the books are always positive and they're always repeating the same theme all the way through. And it's always positive. If I'll just do this, I will be more serene and more peaceful. Okay, go ahead, whoever's next.
But it is from our twisted relations with family, friends, and society at large that many of us have suffered the most. We've been especially stupid and stubborn about them. The primary fact that we fail to recognize is our total inability to form a true partnership with another human being. Our egomania digs two disastrous pitfalls. Either we insist upon dominating the people we know, or we depend upon them far too much. If we lean too heavily on people, they will sooner or later fail us, for they are human too. We cannot possibly meet our incessant demands. In this way, our insecurity grows and festers. When we habitually try to manipulate others to our own willful desires, they revolt and resist us heavily. Then we develop hurt feelings, a sense of persecution, and a desire to retaliate. As we redouble our efforts at control and continue to fail, our suffering becomes acute and constant. We have not once sought to be one in a family, to be a friend among friends, to be a worker among workers, to be a useful member of society. Always we tried to struggle to the top of the heap, or to hide underneath it. This self-centered behavior blocked a partnership relation with any one of those about us. Of true brotherhood, we had small comprehension.
That paragraph describes me exactly. And in the middle of it, it talks about the same thing that it talks about the trying to direct the play and put all the actors in the spot where we want them and everything. It says that. When we habitually try to manipulate others to our own willful desires, they revolt, resist us heavily. Then we develop feelings. As we redouble our efforts to control and continue to fail, our suffering becomes acute and constant. That's exactly what it talks about in the big book on page 61, 62. Okay, go ahead.
Some will object to many of the questions posed because they think their own character defects have not been so glaring. To these, it can be suggested that a conscientious examination is likely to reveal the very defects the objectionable questions are concerned with. Because our surface record hasn't looked so bad, we have frequently been abashed to find that it is so simply because we have buried these self-same defects deep down in us under thick layers of self-justification. Whatever the defects, they have finally ambushed us into alcoholism and misery. Therefore, thoroughness ought to be the watchword when taking inventory. In this connection, it is wise to write out our questions and answers. It will be an aid to clear our thinking and honest appraisal. It will be the first tangible evidence of our complete willingness to move forward.
Okay. Thoroughness ought to be the watchword when doing this inventory. In this connection, it is wise to write out our questions and answers. That's the same thing the big book says. It says write it, put it down on paper, list it about 12 times in that how it works, where it talks about the fourth step. It will be an aid to clear thinking and honest appraisal. The main thing is, we're not thinking about it. It's in black and white and we have to look at it. And then we share that with a sponsor. Shit. Pretty hard to skip around it if we've got it right there in writing. And then what it says is that this will be the first tangible evidence of our complete willingness to move forward. Tangible, something I can touch, see, feel. Okay? I'm no longer in my head. I got it down on paper. I can see it. Okay. We're going to kind of zoom through step 5. And I'll point out some things in step 5. We'll just stay in the 12 and 12 and then we'll go to the big book. Okay? It says at the bottom of that first paragraph, scarcely any step is more necessary to long-term sobriety and peace of mind than this one. So, if I get to the point where I don't want to do a 5th step, I need to read things like this. I've got to do it if I want long-term sobriety and peace of mind. Okay, on page 57 in my little book, it says, what are we likely to receive from step 5? For one thing, we shall get rid of that terrible sense of isolation we've always had. And you guys can go ahead and read this on your own time. So that's the first thing, the first positive thing we're going to get out of step 5. We're going to get rid of that sense of isolationism. Down at the bottom of the page, step 5 was the answer. It was the beginning of true kinship with man and God. I'm actually, if I can do a 5th step, I can actually hook up stronger with my higher power and with man, with my sponsor, with other people in the program I can share things with. Like when I sponsor people, I share some of those things and I get connected with people. I'm no longer isolated. I'm no longer alone. And number 3 is, the bottom of that page, this vital step was also the means by which we began to get the feeling that we could be forgiven. If I do a good 5th step, I'm pretty sure my higher power is going to forgive me if I change and I don't do those things again. Okay? Number 4, next paragraph. Another great dividend we may expect from confiding our defects to another human being is humility. And we're going to learn more about humility in step 7. Okay? Number 5, down at the bottom of the page. More realism and therefore more honesty about ourselves are the great gains we shall make under the influence of step 5. I'm going to become more real. I'm going to get more honest. I want those things. At the top of page 59, it says, if all our lives we had more or less fooled ourselves, there's that real or fancied thing again. Okay? I've got another 1 and 2, middle of the page. Hence, it was most evident that a solitary self-appraisal and the admission of our defects based on that alone wouldn't be nearly enough. We'd have to have outside help, which means I have to give that 5th step to somebody else. I can't just talk about it myself. Bottom of that paragraph. Only by being willing to take advice and accept direction could we set foot on the road to straight thinking, solid honesty, and genuine humility. I want those things. I want straight thinking. I want honesty. I want humility. I have to be willing to take advice and accept direction. Oh shit, that means I'm going to have to do what my sponsor says. I don't want to do that. But I have to do that if I want those things. Okay? That's the first. That's number 1. If I flip the page over, on page 60, first paragraph there, it says, the second difficulty is this. What comes to us alone may be garbled by our own rationalization and wishful thinking. The benefit of talking to another person is that we can get his direct comment and counsel on our situation. So there it talks about it again. Okay? If you want to call it a number 3 at the bottom of the page, our next problem will be to discover the person in whom we are to confide. That's pretty important. At the end of step 5, it says, this feeling of being alone with God and man down at the bottom, this emerging from isolation through the open and honest sharing of our terrible burden of guilt, brings us to a resting place where we may prepare ourselves for the following steps toward a full and meaningful sobriety. There's another one of those things I want. I want a full and meaningful sobriety. So there's no question about it. I have to do a 5th step. Okay? All right. Let's go to the big book. I'm going to flip through Into Action, page 72. I'm going to go through this. Okay. Everybody there on page 72?
Yes.
It says about the middle of that first paragraph, it says, now these are about to be cast out. We're going to take our personal inventory and we're going to get rid of this stuff. Down toward the bottom of the page, about 5 lines up, it says, the best reason first. If we skip this vital step, we may not overcome drinking. So, and I have had people in the past that would get up to step 4 and just refuse to do it, and they go back drinking. Or if they give a step 4 and they kind of hold back a few little odds and ends that they really don't want to share, sometimes they go back drinking because you're still carrying that load around, okay? On page 73, bottom paragraph, it says, and here it is, psychiatrists are inclined to agree with us. We have spent thousands of dollars for examination. We know but few instances where we have given these doctors a fair break. We seldom told them the whole truth, nor have we followed their advice. So, how many of you went to the doctor and said, I drink a couple every day? Yeah, I did that. My company sent me to that doctor every year. And I told him the same thing every year. And then I get an AA. And he's a good friend of my boss's who's in AA. And he's in AA. And when I saw him at a meeting, sitting with my boss, I knew I was screwed. No. They're just looking, they're saying, you little lying son of a bitch. Anyway, you can't get away with anything, okay? Okay, the second thing about doing a 5th step is at the bottom of 73, it says we must be entirely honest with somebody if we expect to live long or happily in this world. There's another one of those things. I would like to live long and happily in this world, so I have to do a 5th step. Number 3, the bottom of that second paragraph. The rule is we must be hard on ourselves, but always considerate of others. Okay? On page 75, about 3 lines down, it says we have a written inventory and we are prepared for a long talk. There's that, having it in writing, having it in black and white. Okay? Now we're going to do all that stuff and we're going to do a 5th step. So this next paragraph says, and here's what I love about the books because it gives us the promises and the rewards for doing that. We pocket our pride and go to it, illuminating every twist of character, every dark cranny of the past. Once we have taken this step, withholding nothing, we are delighted. Here's the promises. We can look the world in the eye. We can be alone at perfect peace and ease. Our fears fall from us. we begin to feel the nearness of our Creator. We may have had certain spiritual beliefs, but now we begin to have a spiritual experience. The feeling that the drink problem has disappeared will often come strongly. We feel we are on the broad highway walking hand in hand with the Spirit of the universe. I want those things. I love the books because they always give me good things for doing what I'm supposed to do in the first place. It tells me, gives me the answers. What am I going to get if I do this? Okay. Bottom paragraph. Says we go home, find a resting place, be quiet, thank God from the bottom of our heart. Carefully reading the first 5 proposals, we ask if we had omitted anything, for we are building an arch through which we shall walk a free man at last. Is our work solid? Are the stones properly in place? Have we skimped on the cement put in the foundation? Have we tried to make mortar without sand? Why is that familiar?
Comes out of the Bible.
On page 62. Somebody read that last paragraph.
This is the how and the why of it. First of all, we had to quit playing God. It didn't work. Next, we decided that hereafter in this drama of life, God was going to be our director. He's the principal. We are his agents. He's the father. We are his children. Most good ideas are simple, and this concept was a keystone for a new and triumphant arch through which we passed.
Read that last couple lines louder, slower.
He is the father, and we are his children. Most good ideas are simple, and this concept was the keystone of a new and triumphant arch which we passed to freedom.
Okay? We're going to be free. I'm going to build this arch with my higher power as the keystone. And then from page 62 to 75, I'm going to do step 4 and 5. And I'm really going to get rid of all that crap. And I'm going to build another arch which I can walk through as a free man. I'm going to have freedom. I'm going to be free of all that stuff. And that's what happened to me. I don't know about you guys, but when I did that 5th step, a tremendous load went off my back. I felt different. I didn't have to carry that around anymore. Okay?
Is that like a promise, like we knew happiness and new freedom?
Yeah.
That's kind of a promise.
Yeah. Okay. Now we're going to do something because it's talking about getting rid of all of our character defects. And what we've done so far in step 4 through both books is we have done a searching and fearful immoral inventory. Okay? We've gotten rid of all this crap. Everything bad that we ever did. But that's not what fourth step says. The 4th step is a searching and fearless moral inventory. And I'm going to pass out, where I passed out last time, these little cards on honesty and the principle. And it talks about character and morals in there. And we're going to read page 69 and 70 and 71. And we're not going to worry about sex, even though that's what it's talking about, because I'm going to show you something else, okay? So somebody start at the bottom of 68, now about sex. Fred.
Now about sex. Many of us needed an overhauling there. But above all, we tried to be sensible on this question. It's so easy to get way off track. Here we find human opinions running to extremes, absurd extremes perhaps. One set of voices cry that sex is a lust of our lower nature, a base necessity of procreation. Then we have the voices who cry for sex and more sex, who bewail the institution of marriage, who think that most of the troubles of the race are traceable to sex causes. They think we do not have enough of it, or that it isn't the right kind. They see its significance everywhere. One school would allow man no flavor for his fare, and the other would have us all on a straight pepper diet. We want to stay out of this controversy. We do not want to be the arbitrator of anyone's sex conduct. We all have sex problems. We'd hardly be human if we didn't. What can we do about them?
Go ahead,
We reviewed our own conduct over the years past, where we had been selfish, dishonest, or inconsiderate. Whom had we hurt? Did we unjustifiably arouse jealousy, suspicion, or bitterness? When were we at fault? What should we have done instead? We got this all down on paper and we looked at it.
Okay, up to this point, they're still talking about everything we did wrong, everything we thought wrong. And now, what's it gonna say?
In this way, we tried to shape a sane and sound ideal for our future sex life. We subjected each relation to this test. Was it selfish or not? We asked God to mold our ideals and help us live up to them. Remember always that our sex powers were God-given and therefore good, neither to be used lightly or selfishly, nor to be despised or loathed.
What our ideal turns out to be, we must be willing to grow toward it. We must be willing to make amends where we have done harm, providing that we do not bring about still more harm in doing. In other words, we treat sex as we would any other problem. In meditation, we ask God what we should do about each specific matter. The right answer will come if we want it.
God alone can judge our sex situation. Counsel with persons is often desirable, for we let God be the final judge. We realize that some people are fanatical about sex as others are loose. They avoid hysterical thinking or advice.
Suppose we fall short of the chosen ideal and stumble. Does this mean we are going to get drunk? Some people tell us so, but this is only a half-truth. It depends on us and on our motives. If we are sorry for what we have done and have the honest desire to let God take us to better things, and have the honest desire to let God take us to better things, we believe we will be forgiven and we will have learned our lesson. If we are not sorry and our conduct continues to harm others, we are quite sure to drink. We are not theorizing. These are facts out of our experience.
Okay. If we read this literally, okay, in the middle of 69, it says, in this way, we tried to shape a sane and sound ideal. We asked God to mold our ideals and help us to live up to them. And then the next paragraph says, whatever our ideal turns out to be, we must be willing to grow toward it. We must be willing to make amends where we've done harm, provided we do not bring about still more harm in so doing. In other words, we treat sex as we would any other problem. So it is just said to us, for all my problems, I need to set up a sane and sound ideal, which is a searching and more fearless moral inventory. And then I have to try and live up to that. And then on the next page, it says, suppose we fall short of the chosen ideal and stumble. So I promised my higher power and my sponsor I'm not going to do something. And then I kind of fall off the path and I do it. Okay? Suppose we fall short. Does this mean we're going to get drunk? Some people tell us so, but that's only a half-truth. It depends on us and on our motives. If we are sorry for what we have done and have the honest desire to let God take us to better things, we believe we will be forgiven and have learned our lesson. If we are not sorry and our conduct continues to harm others, we are quite sure to drink. We're not theorizing, there's facts out of our experience. To sum up about sex and all of our other problems, We earnestly pray for the right ideal and guidance, for guidance in each questionable situation, for sanity and the strength to do the right thing. And that's the first time in the big book it says do the right thing. Okay? The next place it says that's on page 79. Now, I'm going to set up my chosen ideals. What it means is, who am I going to be when I grow up? Okay? How do I want to act now that I'm no longer drinking and I want to change my life? Okay? We will talk about character defects in step 6 next time, but I'm here to tell you something that you can work on between now and next week. That instead of me working on my character defects, and I'll hand this out next time, this is all the character defects in the big one. Okay, instead of me working on all those things and all those instinctual desires that I have, that the instincts in step 4 talked about, if I just write down how I want to live from now on, and I make a list of my do's and don'ts, wills and won'ts, okay? And it's my list. These are the things that I'm going to do in the future. This is the way I'm going to behave, this is the way I'm going to act. And here's the way I'm not going to behave and I'm not going to act. If I make that kind of a list for myself, most of my character defects will disappear because I'm not going to act that way anymore. Now, once I get that list, I have to discipline myself. Nobody else is going to do it, because most of the time nobody's around when I need to make that decision anyway. But I make a list of do's and don'ts, or a list of wills and won'ts. Try that. See how you'll behave in certain circumstances. And I've been doing it a long time, and I can take questions from all of you, and I can tell you how I will react in the situation because I've already thought about it. I've already put it on my do's and don'ts list. There are certain things I'm not going to do. Like, I'm not going to go to a family reunion and be around all them fucking idiots that I'm related to. I would rather go to an AA meeting and be around people I like. Okay? Hard decisions. Self-discipline. Tough. Try to make a list of do's and don'ts. See how it looks next time. And I'll hand these character defect things out now, or if you want one, you can have one.
Absolutely.
And we'll do step 6 next time. Okay?
Okay.
Thank you, Claire.